On the morning of February 12, 1983, a woman named Anna Volkov disappeared from a crowded farmer's market in East Berlin. She left behind a half-filled basket of potatoes and carrots, her winter coat still buttoned to the neck, and no explanation. The vendor who saw her last remembered only that a black Wartburg sedan had stopped at the corner, and that she had walked toward it without hesitation, as if she had been expecting it. Within 40 minutes, every trace of her presence was erased from the official records of the German Democratic Republic. Her name vanished from housing registries, employment files, and even her husband's identity papers. By nightfall, it was as if Anna Volkov had never existed at all. Her husband was a man named Viktor Petrov. He worked as a signals intelligence officer for the KGB's Third Directorate, stationed at a listening post in Karlshorst, where Soviet technicians monitored NATO communications across the border. He was 41 years old, methodical in his habits, and considered by his superiors to be reliable but unremarkable. He drank black tea without sugar, walked the same route to work every morning, and had never given anyone reason to question his loyalty. On the evening of February 12th, when he returned to their apartment on Leninelli and found it empty, he did not call the police. He did not ask the neighbors. He sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours in complete silence, staring at the chair where his wife used to sit, and understood immediately that something far beyond his control had begun. The next morning, a man in a gray suit was waiting for him outside the listening post. The man did not introduce himself. He simply handed Viktor a sealed envelope and walked away. Inside was a single typed sentence in Russian: "She is alive. For now." There was no signature, no return address, no instructions. Just those 5 words, and the unmistakable implication that someone was watching. Someone knew, and someone held all the power. Viktor folded the note carefully, placed it in his coat pocket, and went to work. He logged into his station, put on his headphones, and began transcribing intercepted radio chatter from the American sector, just as he had done every day for the past 7 years. But his hands were shaking, and for the first time in his career, he made 3 transcription errors in a single shift. No one noticed, or if they did, they said nothing. The Cold War had turned Europe into a chessboard where human lives were pieces moved by invisible hands. In 1983, the tension between East and West had reached a point of almost unbearable pressure. NATO had begun deploying Pershing II missiles in West Germany. The Soviet Union had walked out of arms control talks in Geneva. American President Ronald Reagan had called the USSR an evil empire in a speech that was broadcast around the world. And in the shadows, intelligence agencies on both sides were conducting operations so secret that even the men who carried them out did not always know who they were serving or why. Berlin was the center of it all. The city was split down the middle by a wall of concrete and barbed wire, guarded by soldiers with orders to shoot anyone who tried to cross. On the western side, there were nightclubs, jazz music, and neon lights. On the eastern side, there were gray apartment blocks, state-run grocery stores with empty shelves, and the constant presence of the Stasi, the Ministry for State Security, whose agents moved through the population like predators through tall grass. Every phone line was tapped, every letter was read, every conversation was assumed to be overheard. Trust was a luxury no one could afford, and paranoia was the most rational response to the world. Viktor Petrov had been born in Leningrad in 1942, during the siege. His mother had died of starvation when he was 2 years old. His father, a factory foreman, had raised him alone in a single-room apartment with no running water and a wood stove that barely kept them warm through the winter. Viktor grew up believing in the Soviet Union because it was the only thing he had ever known. He joined the Red Army at 18, trained as a radio operator, and was recruited by the KGB at 23, after his superiors noted his aptitude for languages and his ability to work long hours without complaint. He was sent to East Berlin in 1976, assigned to monitor Western communications, and told that his work was vital to the security of the socialist world. He met Anna in 1978, at a party hosted by another KGB officer. She was a translator for the Ministry of Culture, fluent in German and English, with a sharp mind and a quiet sense of humor that made him feel less alone. They were married 3 months later, in a civil ceremony attended by 6 people. They had no children. Anna had wanted them, but Victor had been afraid. Afraid of bringing a child into a world where loyalty was measured by how willing you were to betray the people you loved. Afraid that, if anything ever went wrong, a child would be used against him. Now, as he sat in the listening post with his headphones on, intercepting fragments of conversations between American soldiers and British intelligence officers, he realized that his fear had been justified. But it hadn't protected him. It had only delayed the inevitable. The second message arrived 4 days later. This time it was slipped under the door of his apartment while he was at work. It was a photograph. Anna, sitting in a chair in a windowless room wearing the same dress she had been wearing the day she disappeared. Her face was calm, her hands folded in her lap. There was no visible injury, no sign of distress, but her eyes were different. They were the eyes of someone who understood that she was no longer in control of her own life. On the back of the photograph, someone had written in careful block letters, "You have something we need. We will contact you soon." Victor turned the photograph over and over in his hands, searching for some clue, some detail that would tell him who had taken her and what they wanted, but there was nothing. The room in the photograph was generic, featureless. It could have been anywhere in East Berlin, or West Berlin, or Moscow, or even further away. The message was deliberately vague, designed to keep him off balance, to make him wait, to make him desperate. He burned the photograph in the kitchen sink and flushed the ashes down the toilet. Then he sat at the table and tried to think. Someone had taken his wife. Someone who knew what he did for a living, who knew where he worked, who knew enough to bypass the Soviet security apparatus and make her disappear without a trace. That meant either the KGB itself was involved, or someone with access to KGB resources. Or it meant the enemy had penetrated deeper into East Berlin than anyone wanted to admit. He considered going to his superiors and reporting what had happened, but if the KGB was behind it, reporting it would be suicide. And if the enemy was behind it, reporting it would get Anna killed. Either way, he would lose her. So he did nothing. He went to work, came home, ate his meals alone, and waited. The third message came in the form of a phone call. It was late at night, nearly midnight, and Victor had been lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The phone rang once, then stopped. Then it rang again. He picked it up on the third ring. A voice spoke in German, calm and professional. "Herr Petrov, you will receive a package tomorrow morning. Inside you will find instructions. Follow them exactly. Do not involve your colleagues. Do not attempt to trace this call. If you do, your wife will be executed, and her body will be left in a place where it will never be found. Do you understand?" Victor's throat was dry. He managed to say, "Yes." The line went dead. He did not sleep that night. He sat in the kitchen with the lights off, smoking cigarettes and listening to the silence. He thought about Anna, about the way she used to hum while she cooked, about the small scar on her wrist from a childhood accident, about the sound of her laugh. He thought about what kind of man he had become, sitting in the dark, waiting for orders from an enemy he could not see. The package arrived at 7 in the morning, delivered by a courier who looked like any other East German postal worker. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typewritten instructions. No signature, no letterhead. Just a list of tasks, precise and methodical, like a recipe for treason. He was to copy a specific set of Soviet intelligence files from the listening post archive. Files related to NATO radar installations along the West German border. He was to photograph the documents using a camera that would be left for him in a locker at the Alexanderplatz train station. He was to deliver the photographs to a drop point in the Tiergarten on the western side of the city, by crossing through Checkpoint Charlie using a false identity card that would be provided to him. And he was to do all of this within the next 72 hours. If he succeeded, Anna would be released unharmed. If he failed, or if he attempted to alert Soviet authorities, she would be killed. Victor read the instructions 3 times, then burned the paper in the sink, just as he had burned the photograph. Then he put on his coat and went to work. The listening post at Karlshorst was housed in a converted factory building surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Inside, rows of Soviet technicians sat at desks wearing headphones, transcribing intercepted communications and feeding them into a central analysis unit. The work was tedious and exhausting, but it was also vital. Every conversation intercepted, every code broken. Every piece of intelligence gathered brought the Soviet Union one step closer to understanding what the enemy was planning. Victor had spent 7 years in this building. He knew every hallway, every locked door, every security protocol. He knew which guards were diligent and which were lazy. He knew when the archive was least monitored, and he knew how to access files without leaving a trace in the logbook. He had never used this knowledge for anything other than efficiency. But now, for the first time, he understood why men like him were considered security risks. Because the same skills that made him valuable to the state also made him dangerous. The files he had been ordered to steal were stored in a locked cabinet on the 3rd floor. They contained detailed technical analyses of NATO radar systems, including frequencies, coverage areas, and known vulnerabilities. Whoever had ordered him to steal these files wanted to know how to avoid detection, how to move through enemy airspace undetected, how to strike without warning. It was the kind of information that could turn the balance of power, the kind of information that men killed for. Victor spent the next 2 days planning. He studied the guard rotations, memorized the patrol schedules, and identified a 30-minute window late at night when the archive would be unattended. He retrieved the camera from the locker at Alexanderplatz, a compact East German model small enough to fit in his coat pocket. He tested it in his apartment, photographing pages from a book to make sure the images were clear. Everything was ready. All he had to do was follow the instructions, betray his country, and hope that whoever had taken Anna would keep their word. On the night of February 17th, Victor stayed late at the listening post, as he often did. He told the duty officer that he had fallen behind on his transcription work and needed a few extra hours to catch up. The officer waved him off without interest. By 11 o'clock, the building was nearly empty. Victor walked up to the 3rd floor, unlocked the archive using a key he had borrowed from a colleague earlier in the week, and found the files he needed. He spread them out on a desk, set up the camera, and began photographing each page, one by one. Working quickly and methodically, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. It took him 40 minutes to photograph all 23 pages. When he was finished, he returned the files to the cabinet, locked it, and walked back downstairs. No one stopped him. No one asked questions. He left the building at midnight, the camera hidden in his coat, and walked home through the cold February streets. The next step was the hardest. He had to cross into West Berlin, deliver the photographs, and return without being caught. The false identity card had been left for him in a second locker, this one at the Ostbahnhof station. It identified him as Klaus Richter, an East German civil engineer authorized to travel to the West for a work-related meeting. The card was expertly forged, complete with official stamps and signatures. Whoever was running this operation had resources, connections, and a level of professionalism that terrified him. On the morning of February 18th, Victor dressed in his best suit, put the camera and the false identity card in his briefcase, and walked to Checkpoint Charlie. The crossing point between East and West Berlin was a narrow corridor of concrete barriers, guard towers, and floodlights. East German border guards checked documents with cold efficiency, looking for any sign of deception, any excuse to detain someone. Escape attempts were rare but brutal. The guards were authorized to shoot on sight. Victor handed over the false identity card and waited. The guard examined it, compared the photograph to Victor's face, and asked him the purpose of his trip. Victor answered in a calm, rehearsed voice, "Engineering consultation. I have a meeting with a construction firm in the French sector." The guard stamped the card and waved him through. He walked across the border into West Berlin, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. On the other side, the world was different. The streets were cleaner, the buildings brighter, the air filled with the smell of coffee and exhaust. He walked to the Tiergarten, found the drop point, a hollow tree near the Soviet War Memorial, and left the camera inside. Then he turned around and walked back to Checkpoint Charlie, crossed into the east, and went home. He had done it. He had betrayed everything he had been taught to believe in, everything he had sworn to protect. And now all he could do was wait and hope that Anna would be returned to him. She was not. 3 days passed, then a week, then 2 weeks. Victor went to work, came home, and stared at the walls. He heard nothing. No phone calls, no messages, no photographs. Anna did not come home. And slowly, he began to understand that he had been used. That whoever had taken her had never intended to return her. That the promise had been a lie, designed to make him compliant, to make him useful. On March 4th, he received a final message. It was delivered in the same way as the first, slipped under his door while he was at work. It was a single line typed on the same kind of paper. "Thank you for your cooperation. Your wife is no longer our concern." Victor read the note, folded it carefully, and placed it in the drawer of his desk beside the first message he had received. Then he sat down and tried to decide what kind of man he was. A traitor who had sold his country for nothing. A husband who had failed to save his wife. Or just another casualty of a war that had no front lines, no rules, and no mercy. He did not report what had happened. He did not confess. He continued going to work, transcribing intercepted communications, filing reports, and living the same routine he had lived before Anna disappeared. But inside, something had broken. He no longer believed in the cause. He no longer believed in the system. He no longer believed that anything he did mattered. And then, 6 weeks after Anna's disappearance, something unexpected happened. He was summoned to a meeting at KGB headquarters in Karlshorst. The summons came without warning, delivered by a senior officer who told him only that his presence was required immediately. Victor assumed he had been discovered, that someone had traced the stolen files back to him, that he was about to be arrested and executed. He walked into the building, expecting never to walk out. But the meeting was not what he expected. He was taken to a small office on the 4th floor, where a man in civilian clothes was waiting for him. The man introduced himself as Colonel Dmitry Orlov, a senior officer in the KGB's counterintelligence division. He gestured for Victor to sit, closed the door, and spoke in a quiet, measured tone. "Comrade Petrov, we are aware of what happened to your wife. We are also aware of what you did in response." Victor felt his stomach drop. He said nothing. Orlov continued. "The files you photographed were flagged by our internal security systems 3 days after you accessed them. We traced the leak back to you within a week. Normally, this would result in immediate arrest and execution, but your case is different." Victor's mouth was dry. "Why?" Orlov leaned back in his chair. "Because we know who took your wife, and we know why. And we have decided to use this situation to our advantage." The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Victor stared at Colonel Orlov, trying to understand what he had just heard. His mind was racing, searching for the trap, the angle, the inevitable moment when everything would collapse. But Orlov's expression remained neutral, almost clinical, as if they were discussing crop yields instead of treason and kidnapping. "Your wife was taken by a joint operation involving the CIA and West German intelligence," Orlov said. "They identified you as a vulnerable asset 6 months ago. They monitored your movements, your relationships, your psychology. They determined that you were loyal but not fanatical, that you loved your wife more than you loved the state. And they exploited that weakness." Victor's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs. "Where is she?" "We don't know," Orlov said. "Not yet, but we will find her. And when we do, you will help us turn this situation into an opportunity." "I don't understand." Orlov opened a folder on his desk and slid a photograph across to Victor. It showed a man in his 50s, gray-haired and lean, standing outside a cafe in what looked like West Berlin. "This is Thomas Keller, CIA officer stationed at the Berlin operations base. He runs assets in the East, coordinates intelligence collection, and reports directly to Langley. We believe he was the one who ordered your wife's abduction. We also believe he is planning to use you for additional intelligence operations." Victor looked at the photograph, memorizing the face. Why would he do that? "I already gave him what he wanted. Because men like Keller are never satisfied," Orlov said. "They view people like you as renewable resources. Once they have leverage over you, they will continue to exploit it until you are no longer useful. And then they will discard you." "So what do you want from me?" Orlov folded his hands on the desk. "We want you to continue cooperating with them. We want you to become a double agent." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Victor felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching this conversation happen to someone else. "You want me to work for both sides?" "Precisely. You will continue to provide the CIA with information, but the information you provide will be carefully controlled by us. False intelligence, misleading data, strategic deceptions. You will help us feed them exactly what we want them to believe. And in exchange, we will use our resources to locate your wife and bring her back. And if I refuse?" Orlov's expression did not change. "Then you will be arrested for treason, convicted in a closed trial, and executed. Your wife will remain wherever she is, and her fate will be of no concern to us." Victor looked down at his hands. They had stopped shaking. He felt a strange calm settling over him, the kind of calm that comes when there are no choices left to make. "How do I know you'll keep your word? How do I know you'll actually look for her?" "You don't," Orlov said. "But consider your alternatives. If you refuse, you die, and she remains lost. If you cooperate, there is at least a possibility that we will succeed. I am offering you a chance, Comrade Petrov. It is more than the CIA offered you." Victor thought about Anna, about the photograph of her sitting in that empty room, about the look in her eyes. He thought about the message that had said she was no longer their concern, the casual cruelty of it, the way they had used her and discarded her like a piece of equipment. He thought about the system he had served for 17 years, the system that was now offering him a different kind of exploitation, a different kind of trap, but it was the only trap that led toward her. "What do I have to do?" he asked. Orlov slid another folder across the desk. "Read this tonight, memorize the contents, burn it before morning. Someone will contact you within the next 48 hours with further instructions. Do exactly as they say. And remember, Comrade Petrov, you are no longer just a signals intelligence officer. You are now an instrument of state security. Your life belongs to us." Victor took the folder and stood up. "And my wife's life?" "That," Orlov said, "depends on how useful you prove to be." Victor left the headquarters and walked back to his apartment in a daze. The streets of East Berlin were gray and cold, the sky heavy with clouds that threatened snow. People moved past him with their heads down, wrapped in coats and scarves, anonymous and indifferent. He had lived among them for 7 years, but he had never felt more alone. That night he opened the folder and read its contents by the light of a single lamp. Inside were detailed dossiers on 3 CIA officers operating in West Berlin, including Thomas Keller. There were photographs, biographical information, known associates, operational patterns. There were also instructions for how to make contact, how to communicate, how to appear cooperative without revealing too much. And there was a list of false intelligence that he was authorized to provide. Carefully crafted disinformation designed to mislead Western analysts about Soviet capabilities and intentions. The final page contained a handwritten note. "Your wife is alive. We have confirmed her location. Continue to cooperate, and we will bring her home." Victor stared at the note for a long time. He wanted to believe it. He needed to believe it. But he had been lied to so many times already that belief felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. Still, it was all he had. So he memorized the contents of the folder, burned it in the sink, and went to bed, knowing that when he woke up, he would no longer be the man he had been. The contact came 2 days later. Victor was walking home from work when a car pulled up beside him, a dark Lada with tinted windows. The rear door opened and a voice from inside said, "Get in." He got in. The man sitting beside him was in his 30s, clean-shaven, wearing a leather jacket and jeans. He looked more like a factory worker than an intelligence officer, which was probably the point. "My name is Sergey," he said. "I will be your handler. From now on, you report to me, and only to me. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. Tomorrow night you will receive a phone call from Thomas Keller. He will ask you to meet him at a location in West Berlin. You will agree. You will cross the border using the same false identity you used before. And you will tell him that you are willing to continue working for him, but only if he provides proof that your wife is still alive. Will he provide it?" Sergey shrugged. "Probably. He needs you to trust him, at least enough to keep you compliant. But whether the proof is real or fabricated, we will determine later. Your job is to play the role of a desperate man who still has hope." "Can you do that?" Victor looked out the window at the passing streets. "I don't have to play that role," he said. "It's what I am." Sergey smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Good. Desperation is convincing. Just remember, you are working for us now. Everything you say to Keller, everything you give him, everything you learn from him, you report back to me. If you betray us, your wife dies. If you hesitate, your wife dies. If you try to run, your wife dies. The only way she survives is if you do exactly what we tell you. I understand." "I hope so," Sergey said. "Because this is not a game, Comrade Petrov. This is war. And in war, there are no second chances." The car stopped at a corner 3 blocks from Victor's apartment. Sergey handed him a piece of paper with a phone number written on it. "Memorize this. If you need to reach me, call this number and ask for Ivan. Someone will relay the message. Do not call unless it is absolutely necessary. And do not trust anyone, not even the people you think are on your side. In this business, everyone is expendable." Victor took the paper, memorized the number, and tore it into pieces. Then he got out of the car and walked the rest of the way home. The phone call from Thomas Keller came the next evening, exactly as Sergey had predicted. The voice on the other end was calm and friendly, speaking in accented but fluent German. "Herr Petrov, I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss. I would like to meet with you tomorrow evening. There is a cafe in Kreuzberg on the western side. I will be there at 8 o'clock. I hope you will join me." Victor gripped the phone tightly. "I want proof that my wife is alive." There was a pause. Then Keller said, "Of course, I understand your concern. I will bring what you need. But you must come alone, and you must come willingly. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. I look forward to seeing you, Herr Petrov." The line went dead. Victor crossed into West Berlin the following evening, using the same false identity card as before. The guards at Checkpoint Charlie barely glanced at him. He had become just another face in the endless flow of people moving between the two halves of the divided city. The cafe was small and dimly lit, tucked into a side street away from the main boulevards. Thomas Keller was sitting at a corner table wearing a gray suit and reading a newspaper. He looked up as Victor entered, smiled, and gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Herr Petrov," he said in German, "thank you for coming. Please, sit." Victor sat. Keller folded the newspaper and set it aside. Up close, he looked older than in the photographs, with lines around his eyes and a weariness in his expression that suggested too many years spent in the shadows. But his eyes were sharp, calculating, the eyes of a man who had learned to read people the way others read books. "I imagine this has been a difficult time for you," Keller said. "I want you to know that I take no pleasure in what has happened. But sometimes, in our line of work, difficult choices must be made." "Where is my wife?" Victor said. Keller reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. He placed it on the table between them. It showed Anna sitting in a different room than before, holding a newspaper with a visible date, March 7th, 1983, 2 days ago. She looked tired, but unharmed. "She is safe," Keller said. and she will remain safe as long as you continue to cooperate with us." Victor stared at the photograph, searching for some sign that it was real, that she was truly alive. "What do you want from me?" "More of the same," Keller said. "We need continued access to Soviet intelligence files. Specifically, we are interested in information about new radar systems being deployed along the inner German border, as well as any updates to Soviet missile defense protocols. You have access to these files. We need you to provide them to us on a regular basis. And if I do this, you will release my wife?" Keller smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Eventually, yes. But these things take time, Herr Petrov. We must ensure that you are reliable, that you will not turn against us, that you understand the consequences of betrayal. For now, your wife will remain in our custody. Think of it as insurance." Victor felt a cold rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "How do I know you won't kill her once you have what you want?" "You don't," Keller said. "But consider this. Your wife is more valuable to us alive than dead. As long as she is alive, you will continue to work for us. If we kill her, we lose our leverage, and you become useless. It is in our best interest to keep her safe." Victor looked at the photograph again. Anna's eyes seemed to stare back at him, pleading, hoping, trusting that he would find a way to bring her home. He folded the photograph and put it in his pocket. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Keller leaned back in his chair, satisfied. "There is a new radar installation being constructed near Magdeburg. We need the technical specifications, the deployment timeline, and the operational protocols. You will access the files, photograph them, and deliver the photographs to us within 2 weeks. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. You will receive further instructions through the same channels as before. And Herr Petrov, I want you to understand something. I am not your enemy. I am simply doing my job, just as you are doing yours. We are both prisoners of the same system, forced to make choices we would prefer not to make. But if we work together, perhaps we can both survive this." Victor stood up. "I don't care about survival," he said. "I only care about getting my wife back." Keller nodded. "Then we have the same goal. I will be in touch." Victor left the cafe and walked back toward Checkpoint Charlie. The streets of West Berlin were alive with music and laughter, people spilling out of bars and restaurants, oblivious to the silent war being waged in the shadows around them. He crossed back into the east without incident and went directly to a public phone booth 3 blocks from his apartment. He dialed the number Sergei had given him and asked for Ivan. The line clicked twice. Then a voice said, "Go ahead. Tell Sergei I made contact," Victor said. "Keller wants intelligence on the Magdeburg radar installation. He gave me 2 weeks. Understood. Wait for further instructions." The line went dead. Victor walked home through the empty streets, his mind churning with questions and strategies and half-formed plans. He was caught between 2 predators now, each one promising salvation and threatening destruction. The KGB wanted him to betray the CIA. The CIA wanted him to betray the KGB. And Anna was somewhere in between, a pawn in a game that neither side cared about winning, only about not losing. Over the next 3 days, Sergei contacted him twice, each time with carefully crafted false intelligence that Victor was to pass along to the Americans. The documents looked authentic, complete with official stamps and technical diagrams. But the information they contained was subtly wrong, designed to mislead Western analysts about the true capabilities of Soviet radar systems. Victor photographed the documents exactly as instructed and prepared to deliver them at the next scheduled drop. But something was wrong. He could feel it in the way Sergei spoke to him, in the way Colonel Orlov had looked at him during their meeting, in the careful precision of every instruction he received. They were using him, yes, but they were also watching him, testing him, waiting for him to make a mistake. And he realized that the KGB had never intended to return Anna at all. They were dangling the possibility in front of him the same way the CIA had, using hope as a weapon, keeping him compliant and useful until the moment he was no longer needed. He was alone, truly alone. And if he wanted to save Anna, He would have to do it himself. On March 15th, Victor made a decision. He began keeping his own records, separate from what he reported to Sergei and what he delivered to Keller. He started documenting every meeting, every instruction, every piece of intelligence that passed through his hands. He hid the records in the walls of his apartment, behind loose bricks and inside hollow furniture legs, places where no one would think to look. He did not know yet what he would do with the information, but he understood that knowledge was the only currency he had, and that if he was going to survive this, he needed to know more than either side thought he knew. At the same time, he began searching for Anna himself. He could not do it openly, but he could listen, observe, and piece together fragments of information from the intelligence traffic that passed through the listening post. He started paying closer attention to communications involving prisoner transfers, safe-house locations, and covert detention facilities. He cross-referenced signals traffic with known CIA operational patterns. And slowly, over weeks of careful analysis, he began to narrow down the possibilities. There were 3 likely locations where Anna could be held. One was a CIA safe house in the Dahlem district of West Berlin. Another was a joint American-British facility near the Rhine. The third was a private residence in the suburbs of Munich, used occasionally for high-value detainees who needed to be kept off the books. Victor knew he could not act directly. If he tried to cross into the West and locate her himself, he would be caught and killed. But he also knew that both the KGB and the CIA had resources he could manipulate, if he was careful, if he played the role they expected him to play while secretly working toward his own goal. On March 28th, he delivered the false intelligence to Keller as instructed. But he also slipped in a single piece of genuine information buried deep in the technical specifications, a hint about a new Soviet communications protocol that the CIA would find valuable. He did it deliberately, carefully, making it look like an accident, a momentary lapse in his otherwise careful disinformation. When Sergei found out, which Victor knew he would, he could claim ignorance, claim that he had been under pressure and made a mistake. It would make him seem fallible, human, less like a calculating double agent and more like a desperate man trying to hold things together. And it would give him leverage, because both sides would now believe he was capable of making mistakes, which meant both sides would underestimate him. The gamble worked. Sergei reprimanded him, but did not report him to Colonel Orlov. Keller, meanwhile, became more trusting, believing that Victor was genuinely trying to help the CIA in exchange for his wife's safety. Both sides thought they had him under control. Neither side realized that he was learning to play them against each other. By mid-April, Victor had identified the most likely location where Anna was being held, the safe house in Dahlem. He based his conclusion on a pattern of encrypted communications between the Berlin operations base and a specific address, combined with references to a high-value asset requiring long-term accommodation. It was not proof, but it was enough. The next step was the hardest. He needed to get a message to Anna, to let her know he was still looking for her, still fighting for her, that she had not been forgotten. But he could not do it through official channels, and he could not do it in person. He needed someone on the inside, someone with access to the safe house, someone he could trust. And then he remembered something Keller had said during one of their meetings. The CIA officer had mentioned a woman named Erika, a German translator who worked for the Americans but had family in the East. Keller had mentioned her in passing, as an example of how the Cold War divided families and loyalties. But Victor had filed the name away, and now he realized it might be his only chance. He spent 2 weeks researching Erika, using the resources available to him at the listening post. He discovered that her brother had defected to the West in 1975, but that her parents still lived in East Berlin, in the Prenzlauer Berg district. She visited them twice a year, crossing through Checkpoint Charlie with official permission from the West German authorities. Victor waited until her next scheduled visit, then approached her parents' apartment late one evening. He knocked on the door, and when the father answered, Victor identified himself as a friend of Erika's brother and said he had an urgent message that needed to be delivered to her. The father was suspicious, but Victor's desperation must have been convincing, because after a long pause, the old man nodded and led him inside. Victor wrote a short note, sealed it in an envelope, and asked the father to give it to Erica the next time she visited. The note said only, Anna Volkov. Dahlem safe house. Tell her Victor is coming. He did not know if the message would reach her. He did not know if Erica would help, or if she would report him to the CIA. But it was the only move he had left. 3 weeks later, in early May, Victor received a response. It came in the form of a phone call to the listening post, from a woman who identified herself as a distant cousin and asked if he could meet her at a cafe in East Berlin. Victor agreed, and when he arrived, he found Erica waiting for him. She was in her 40s with graying hair and tired eyes. She did not waste time with pleasantries. I delivered your message, she said quietly. Anna received it. She wanted me to tell you that she is holding on, but that you should not risk your life trying to save her. She said to let her go. Victor felt something break inside him. I can't do that. Erica looked at him with a mixture of pity and understanding. Then you need to know something, she said. The safe house in Dahlem is being closed down at the end of this month. All detainees are being transferred to a more secure location. If you are going to act, you have very little time. Where are they transferring her? I don't know, Erica said. But I know someone who might. There is a CIA logistics officer named Fisher. He handles prisoner transfers. If you can get to him, he might have the information you need. Victor leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. How do I reach him? You don't, Erica said. But I can. If you give me something valuable enough, something I can trade to him, he might be willing to help. Victor thought about the intelligence he had access to, the secrets he had been guarding, the carefully controlled disinformation he had been feeding to both sides. And he realized that the only way to save Anna was to burn everything down, to take the biggest risk of his life and hope that it would be enough. I can give you the location of a KGB listening post in West Berlin, Victor said. It has been operating undetected for 3 years. If you give that to Fisher, it should be enough to buy his cooperation. Erica studied him carefully. That will get you killed. I know, Victor said, but it is the only thing I have that is valuable enough. She nodded slowly. I will make the approach. But you need to understand, even if Fisher agrees, there is no guarantee you will be able to reach Anna in time. And if you are caught, both sides will kill you. I understand. Erica stood up. I will contact you within the week. In the meantime, prepare yourself. Because once this starts, there is no going back. She left the cafe, and Victor sat alone in the fading light, staring at his reflection in the window. He had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He had betrayed the KGB by offering real intelligence to the CIA. He had betrayed the CIA by working with the KGB. And now he was betraying both of them by trying to save the one person who mattered more to him than loyalty, more than ideology, more than survival itself. He did not know if he would succeed. He did not even know if Anna was still alive. But for the first time since she had disappeared, he felt like he was moving toward something instead of just waiting to be destroyed. And that, in the end, was all he had left.